Welcome to On Top of the Covers, a weekly podcast by Orlove dedicated to all the creative visionaries, entrepreneurs, artists, makers, disruptors around the world. We are featuring a variety of inspirational stories of people contributing to the culture of music, how they do it creatively, artistically, personally, professionally. There really is an emerging rise of the creative class, especially as it merges together with entrepreneurship and really changing times. I'm Matt Gottesman, your host and director of the Orlove brands. And, we set out to do this because we know that music was one of the biggest connectors in the world. It's a common bond. We're opening up the conversations beyond a lot of times what industry, quote unquote, allows, right? There's a lot of art, there's contributors, there's a lot of different varying missions. And we want to have those conversations that are often missing from mainstream. So, we're here to show that unconventional way and different path to success that a lot of our guests, take. And so we're gonna dive right in. And today I've got an incredible guest. And we're going to be talking about contributing to growth and expansion of the human experience, if you will. Obviously, music and art and expression is one of the greatest ways to do that. And so I've got Josh Wendel. He's the CEO of Envision Festival, born in New York City and, the concrete jungle island, of course, which is, where I came from, Bronx. So, it's interesting that we were chatting a little bit before the show started. He lived in Florida until he was 14. Ran away from home in search of his vision, living off the land and living in the community, which you'll begin to understand as we talk about Envision Festival. He didn't know how to create at that time, but he went to an emotional growth in high school in northern Idaho, and that's how he got into gardening and philosophy. Attended the University of Denver, and he realized his interests lay elsewhere. Happens all the time, as everybody knows, in college, of course. I as well, and then he became a vegan and really felt that calling to live in the tropics of the land. Vehemently studied nutrition and wanted to change the world. Began to have conversations around veganism. Was learning about food supply chain, the treatment of animals, and of course the harm of eating food that isn't aligned with our human development. That was a very big journey myself as I started to learn that, and that's a conversation maybe for this podcast and later on. But it's definitely, there's a lot there to learn and what goes in our bodies. And he became and is passionate about, sharing the message with the entire world. He began also studying Chinese medicine and tapped into the interest of energy work, herbs and nutrition. And that was the most well-rounded degree, which at a foundation was his personal philosophical points of view. He started a food company called The Jungle. And when he was in his early 20s, he moved to Boulder, Colorado and began learning about raw foods. And The Jungle was originally manufactured in a facility, and they were gearing up to do a mass manufacturing. And that company, along with the cost to manufacture, never made sense. So it was too expensive, despite actually having good demand. I can completely attest to that in business. But the biggest realization was that the energy and time it dedicated to creating, developing, and promoting the company, his ethos and message was a way of living that wasn't actually going to live. So his message of living in the jungle, living a sustainable lifestyle, and growing his own food helped him commit to create and spread the message from a place of authenticity. And being an example of living that life, he moved to Costa Rica. And in his mid-20s, it was the first place that he felt like home. And a place where you can walk around barefoot, be your most natural self. It's actually very grounding. And it felt and still feels right to be a human being living in Costa Rica and growing his own food and creating a harmonious relationship with nature. And so he had the intention of finding a piece of property to start a community. And along that same journey, Envision was born. It's an example of something he was actively creating, not just a festival interlaced with sustainable ideas. And it's a platform of what can actually work, sustainable living in an environment that is suitable for us to live in. The festival takes place 15 minutes away from a sustainable permaculture farm, and they'll be tying into future Envision events, and they're launching here in the coming months. It has been a long road of setting intentions and holding tightly into the ethos to prioritize creating a place that is a celebration. They're on about 11 years, I think ago it was started, right? Roughly.
Yeah.
And so grateful to have you on the show, Josh. It's a beautiful background because I also think it shows the evolution of a person getting to know themselves more, and then going more with what actually feels right internally versus kind of the concrete jungle way of doing things, right?
Yeah, Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I don't know what else there is to talk about now.
All right.
I think
Well,
that
I'm
you
done.
guys,
So
you
thank
just
you.
nailed it all.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. This was a really great
Yeah.
time.
All right. We'll see you later.
Okay, great. Everybody go check out Envision Festival. Um,
Yeah.
so anybody that's starting to become very familiar with the show, we do rapid fire questions, and we like to do them at the beginning, and then we'll dive in more into this topic and theme of contributing to the growth and expansion of the human experience and all that you're doing with Envision and how we got here. More so with the festival as well. So we do these rapid fire questions here at the beginning, and so without further ado, if question number one, if all music were just to be wiped away from the face of the earth, like gone, and you have 3 albums you're allowed to save and only listen to 3 albums the rest of your life, what would they be?
I love these questions. I definitely have to go with the ones that I have found as timeless, because obviously I have current favorites, but if I'm going to be stuck with them, it's the ones that I've always gone back to. And I feel like thinking about these questions definitely makes me a cliche hippie. But first one, Pink Floyd Metal. Growing up, that was like my go-to, and it gives you through the journey from the positive, the light, the dark, and it was something that always gave me comfort. Not necessarily an album, because my favorite band is and always was Grateful Dead. So Grateful Dead, 5/8/77 Ithaca Cornell show, classic. I could listen to that a million times and never get tired of it. Grateful Dead is still my favorite. Always plucks on the heartstrings. And then a little more current, but is Emancipator. Was it Safe and Steep Cliffs? I think that was the name of it. So bad with all of the electronic artists. I have a hard time remembering the names of albums or songs. But yeah, Emancipator, perfectly produced, and never get tired of it.
I dig it. Yeah, it's funny when you said, I don't know, I can't remember all the names nowadays. It's true, like there's just so much, because music and content is pumped out so much more and more readily available than ever before. And so sometimes people will bring up an artist, and I'm like, yeah, I think I heard of that album. And then all of a sudden I look on my iPhone, I have like the entire album.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I found that like last year. Yeah,
Happened to a few people this weekend actually that I recommended.
So all right, amazing. All right, question number 2: name an influential person, living or non-living, that if you could interact with for one night, who would they be?
Such a tough one, because there's many in so many different ways. I have to say, due to the practice that I personally need myself, I would have to go with Eckhart Tolle. The power of now. It's always for me an art in a practice, not an art, a practice of being present. I'm always striving. I'm always looking for to create a different future, a better future. What else can we do? How can we improve this? How can we make it better? How can we make the experience better for attendees and guests, and create more and more and more? And it's always a practice for me to just stop and be present, soak in the moment, and allow yourself to embrace the moment. So
think about that conversation, right, with him. I mean, that's a very astral, there is no time. We're in like parallel universes, and no, an amazing choice.
All we got is the present.
Yeah. Amazing choice. In your opinion, what's the best music focused film of all time for you? And by the way, that could be like a documentary, or a historical piece, or or fiction, nonfiction. It doesn't matter.
Go back to being a cliche hippie and say Grateful Dead. I think it was What a Long Strange Trip, that like the 4-part series that was on Amazon. And the reason I love it is because it really shows them that they were creating what they wanted to create. Record labels tried to put them into, create the perfect album that was going to sell well, because that's how bands make money. And they were all about the live experience. They had a vision for what they wanted to create and did it because they loved doing it in the way that they loved doing it, and allowed people to come in and tape their concerts, which was not not loved by the record companies trying to sell albums, but they did what they did because they loved doing it, and yeah, created something pretty amazing out of it.
It's almost like they were the original creator community digital, kind of distribution before the internet. It's like, hey, just we give it away and we connect with our fans, directly. We don't, we are the distribution. And it's so interesting when industries, not just music industry, but all industries, they just don't get it. It's a very difficult thing of like control, giving up the control. And you're like, look, relax, it's going to be okay. Actually, it's going to do even better than you could ever imagine by doing the right thing.
And right now there's so many models, and I almost, I definitely understand and respect the studio musicians,
right.
And it's a challenge right now to be able to sell that as a form of art. I'm a live experience type person, because, having producing festivals, but it's the music industry is always shifting, and I think that's the you have to be flexible, can't fight change.
Absolutely.
But they were the first ones that said, okay,
right,
this is what we want to do. We love playing shows.
And by the way, that's a really great point that you brought up, is that, like, look, now live music has kind of had a massive shift, which I'm sure we'll talk about here too. And studio musicians and studios in general, like, they have now a new level of responsibility of, like, all working together for the greater common good. So you to your point about flexibility, that's a forever thing, forever flexibility, or what is it, like, adapt or die, I think is what they say in the tech world. So okay. And finally, question number 4, if an important book, podcast, or audible, it can be anything, that has helped you navigate your creativity and passion.
Oh, I think I went through this with, it was, I think Eckhart Tolle, to go back to it. Hate to repeat the answer, but yeah, that's that. I mean, otherwise, it's just been a series through the evolution of the story that you told of myself, getting into philosophy, questioning who I was, where I was at a young age, and getting into existentialism at a young age. Then I realized we create our own purpose. It is upon ourselves to create the purpose, and which actually kind of led me into Taoism. And I've never adhered to any one specific philosophy or religion too hard. I think we have a lot to learn from all of them, but Taoism is always the one that I felt the most connected with, because you're surrendering to the flow, and you're allowing, and instead of trying to fight change, you try to help navigate it, which is always still a practice too. There's no, like, it's always, am I battling this, or how can I help shift and move and flow with it? And it's always a practice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I heard something really great recently, which is, you don't have to pick apart every single thing. You can acknowledge it, have the emotion come in, like, acknowledge the emotion, and, simply allow it to, like, lean into it and allow it to not only pass, but to, kind of honor it, versus just simply pick it apart constantly, because that's not really, because then in essence we sometimes cause a little bit more resistance in doing so, versus just acknowledging it and, like, oh, why am I actually feeling this way, and where does that actually come from? And now that I have a greater understanding, it just kind of starts to dissolve. So
exactly.
So I like that you bring up, well, your background. I want to get into your background real quick, because before we kind of go on with some of these other topics, which I think they're all really blended together. You didn't take a traditional route. I have never taken a traditional route. And so I really resonate with you. And I constantly want the rest of the world to feel comfortable with that, because it's okay to pivot. It's okay to pivot in a completely different direction. And it's okay to build upon each thing, even if they're different than the previous. And so I would love for you to explain and really just share, what led up to Envision Festival, and then what you've noticed since really going down that path. Because I know I read some of your bio, but I would love more of the context of, like, hey, I was doing this, and this, something didn't click, or something didn't feel, it felt almost there, but I had to make the right necessary changes, and here's where I realized that, and boom, like, I pivoted. So I would love for you to kind of talk a bit more about the journey on the way to Envision, and then into Envision.
Yeah, absolutely. How far back do I go?
The Big Bang Theory.
I think, yeah, totally. So, for me, I think something about me naturally, I've never been afraid to take that leap. I've never, when I see something that I want to go for, I'm probably overconfident in doing it. And in my life have learned the tools to how to be more calculated. And when I say that, it's if I'm not happy in a moment, if I see something that I need to change, I'm not afraid to do that. Um, in the way that even when I was young, when I ran away, I felt like I needed something else. I did that. Moving to Costa Rica, I moved here by myself. I was 22, I don't know, 22, 23. I moved here by myself. I didn't know anybody. I knew that the life I was living in Colorado wasn't the life that I was preaching. The thing that I want, the message I was trying to create for the world wasn't that. That I wasn't getting to live it. So everything was an evolution. And yeah, so every step of the way, I've always been ambitious to make that change when I needed to make that change. And, I think the most important lesson for me was that I didn't, how can I live the message and come from that place of authenticity that you were speaking about? And I moved down here. I didn't know exactly what I was going to create. I knew I wanted to create a community, a sustainable community. I had this vision since I was probably 12 or 13. I didn't really know how to get there, but I had a vision of living off the land in the tropics, walking around barefoot and, living as if I was an animal living in nature. Where would you live? That's the same thing with the diet, nutrition, raw foods, no longer a raw foodist, vegan, but the closer that we get to our natural state, the better. The magically, nobody says. Well, if they do, I'll contest it. But nobody says that eating more tropical organic fruits growing on your land is bad for you. There's never seen too many studies out there showing that. Somehow, cell phones probably not great for you. Somehow, living in nature, the closer we can get to that. I'm not going to contest that, when you get sick, you shouldn't take an antibiotic. There's there is a time and place for non-natural
right
modalities to come in. So in terms of creating the festival, I came to Costa Rica. I set out to find a piece of land that I can create a sustainable community. And the things that I missed, I was living in Boulder, Colorado. I loved good food. I was in the food industry. Promised myself I'd never be in the food industry again. And I loved music. We were producing events and small parties and hosting bands. And I loved the music out of Colorado. So I came down here and those were the things that I missed. So that's when I decided to start a restaurant that evolved into doing a small festival. And then one thing led to another. I found a group of partners that also had similar visions and we all came at it from a different angle. Of course, we didn't know what we were actually doing the first couple of years, but that was kind of the evolution that led us to Envision. And then, yeah, it's just been an evolution since then. And it's funny I feel very privileged to be at a moment that after 10 years that all of those passions are starting to intersect. Obviously Envision is a reflection of all of those things that I've always been passionate about, whether it's the music, the food, the way of living, building sustainably, finding a way to live in harmony with this planet. It's a privilege to be at a place that 10 years later that we're actually getting to create something so much more permanent. And yeah, so it's all an evolution, and we're, if you're not busy growing, you're busy dying. So
amen. You said a lot of really key points in there, which was, well, first of all, you're absolutely right. When we're younger, there's an overconfidence of, I'm going to go try this. And then when we're older, we're like, I'm still going to go try this, but I'm going to think a little bit about it and calculate some of the the potential moves based on what I've learned from just jumping in every single time, which that's how we got there in the first place. At least that's what I've noticed now at 41. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, let's go. But let me just jot down a few things that I know are probably needed to take me on my journey that will probably
Yeah.
protect me versus how I used to just be like, yeah, I'll just leave it all behind. Let's just go. So,
Yeah, let's figure it out later.
but what was also cool though too, but even when you went to Costa Rica, you know, I like that idea of you were saying like along the lines of I didn't know what I was really going to create, but you still, so you had the flexibility of not knowing, but the intuition of knowing you needed to go. And I think that balance is so important, and it's often missing with people, that there's that, you know, ability to, you know, not have all the answers, and I'm going to trust my gut. It's just a feeling. And I know that freaks out a lot of matrix living or mainstream living. I get it, because it's like, what do you mean it's just a feeling? What do you mean? It's like, well, yeah. It's just a feeling. Like I have to go off of that, because that's part of my soul, you know, creating, and I'll be fine. Everything will be great. And that's very Eckhart Tolle, I think, as well. It's very, you know, like,
Yeah, totally.
You know, right. So, and then when you know, you're talking about creating the festival, I love when you brought up, you know, you found people who believed in the same. Of course you did. Like, that's how things work, right? And that you know, you guys didn't necessarily know what you were doing in the beginning, and that happens in everything, because that's the point of creationism, right? Like, we're trying to figure out the pieces that all fit together, and then in itself it has its own evolution based on the people we're serving, and what the feedback is that comes in, and how do we keep evolving and expanding its service to the people. So I like that you brought that up. And then that last part about, you know, all the passions are starting to intersect. We really are living in a great time where they are all intersecting, you know, where art and health and sustainability and food and, you know, well, good media, like this connecting media, you know, and music and, you know, and because I'm a tech nerd in the cryptocurrency world and NFTs and like all these amazing things all kind of merging together to be like, no, we, you know, creativity has no bounds, and it's becoming this living, breathing, sustainable, you know, contributory thing. So I think that's incredible. You know, what's going on. So I like that you brought that up as well too. Now I was looking at the 7 pillars of Envision. I would love for you to talk a little bit about, like, I mean, those are very important topics, and they comprise of Envision. And I said, you know, for me, it was like we basically focusing on the aspects of a human being, or, you know, nurturing the soul in a human experience. It's kind of how I look at it. But I would love for you to talk about some of the pillars, and, you know, and I can relist them out, you know, off the site. But you know, I thought they were
sure.
Yeah, I mean, so for the audience, sustainability, music, spirituality, movement, health, art, and education. I mean, there's your homeschooling, everybody. You know, so I'd love for you to expand on
totally
all of them, any of them, whichever one that mean the most. Yeah.
I think that there's the most important factor, because the way that we view the pillars are that they're facets of Envision. They don't necessarily stand for a value behind any of those facets. Those are the things that you would expect to find. Those are the things that the facets that we value and prioritizing to make sure that they're part of the experiences that we create. Behind all of those, what weaves them together? What is the mission behind them? What is the message? What are the values? And that to say that in the most broad sense, without diving too deep into any one of them, is that how does it our focus on creating our connection to the natural world, our connection to ourselves, to live an inspired life. I was like, there was a concept called the triple bottom line in business, which is people, planet, profit. So to make sure that all things are in harmony, it's not just about one or the other. If you don't, you know, profit's always the one that people in the sustainable world are a little shy to talk about, but financial sustainability is a very important aspect of a business. And obviously that's the one that traditionally businesses focus on, is that bottom line. How are we doing? Profits first, but how does it affect the people? So is it having a positive social impact, and how is it affecting the environment? Are we having a positive effect on the environment? All of those things, I think that's all of the pillars lean back into that. So music, we could say music as a general. What type of music? I don't want to say that any type of music is good or bad. Everybody, I think there's benefits and there's things that I'm always thinking about, even if it's not my favorite type of music. What is it about that? And what's the version of that inspires that connection to nature, inspires our greatest selves, it inspires ourselves to shine through. And going back to it, puts us in harmony with each other, with the community, and with nature. That's what we focus on. So music, for instance, and I'm just going to pick the one pillar. I focus on the interactions on the dance floor, the people that people when you're on the dance floor, that you're having communication, that people are feeling uplifted, that there is, whatever genre it is, that it's creating an interaction in a positive space with people on the dance floor. So just making sure that every pillar is, and this is what I say about Envision, is that whether you came for a musician, the headliner, which is always the hook and bait, right? Is, oh my God, I'm going to see my favorite artist, and I may have heard of Envision, I heard of Costa Rica, but no matter what, I want that person to walk away with the message of what was behind Envision, that connection to nature. So that's the hook and bait. But when you're there, the most important part of that experience is that you're barefoot, you're in the jungle, you see howler monkeys overhead for sunrise, you're eating a mango, you're jumping in the ocean. That's the experience. That's the thing that says that reminds people that there's something more to this. So I always want people, even if they just made it to the stage, or if they just came with their family and only did yoga and went to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, never experienced any of the main stages, I want that message to come through one way or another. So we put a lot of intention into the experience and curating the experience. Just as one thing that's very specific about our festival, it's highly curated. We think about every stage, every artist, and that it all tells a story and gets people to that similar space. And thankfully it feels like it's being received in that way. So,
well, I think there's a lot of really incredible things that you're doing in there, because typically, if a festival goer is just going out into, a random field, yes, they're seeing the music and they're there for the music. And then of course you got all the consumerism that's which is fine, because out of whether it's sponsors or with, shops and things like that, but it's mostly just centralized on, it's only the music, it's only partying, and that's it. And if I were to look at Envision, I look at it as like, hey, listen, let's just kind of remove you from everyday living and kind of ground you a bit, and pull
yeah.
you know what I mean? And pull you out of that, that everyday living, and more into, hey, here's some things to think about in living like a more sustainable lifestyle, and have you start thinking about other things, not just about the music, but what actually is really around you, taking a moment out for yourself, if you will, right? So I find that to be so immensely important. So I that's what one of the things I was connecting on when you were talking about. And then, when you're talking about even like down to the music, like having communication and feeling uplifted and positive, it's, I believe when we create experiences for people that kind of, weirdly enough, slow them down, even though we're speeding them up in reality, or a new reality, it allows people to kind of really rethink their approach. And so I like that you were saying, even if they don't come for the headliner, but they're coming for, a family experience, or for the yoga, and for they're just, again, removing themselves from everyday living and everyday rat race, maybe everyday living, and into more of a kind of a grounded state. And then the second thing I really liked is that I like the fact that you used a festival to say, listen, I want to draw you for A, but I want to remind you of B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
Yeah, totally.
And that I really, really dig, because it's kind of like saying, hey, listen, I get it. This is where you guys are focused. Can I get you to consider some other things while you're here? And I think that that's how we a lot of times lead change, is to get people, on a common like a commonality, a common and then once they're there, it's like, hey, can I show you a few other things that are really cool that, you know, you don't have to partake in, but you might be of interest to you. And then it starts to make them critically think about things differently, right?
Yeah, and I think everybody has, you know, when you're focused on changing the world, influencing people, and, you know, ideally in positive ways, there's a lot of different ways to do that. For me, when I got really into diet, nutrition, I started studying plant-based diet, plant-based nutrition. My brother actually did a movie called Forks Over Knives. It's a big documentary that is, you know, and we had a natural food company. When I initially got into it, I started finding out so many truths that were really painful to know. You know, it was so hard to see, and I try to tell people what you shouldn't eat, why you should eat this, don't eat that. It's going to hurt. You're hurting the planet, you're hurting animals, and you're killing yourself all in the one thing. And I thought that people were going to be receptive. And then I realized I ended up in a lot of arguments, and I realized there was so much resistance. And at that point in time, I committed to myself that if I'm going to make change, I want to do that through creating positive experiences. I want to create a container that people come into and have those experiences. That's when I got into the natural food business, because it's much easier to digest the concepts, pun intended, when it's a pleasurable experience, as opposed to being force fed. Another pun. I'm a very funny guy. Except when you're being force fed the concepts that this is what you need to do, and then you're met with resistance as to why you should or shouldn't do that. So if you're there at Envision for the music, but wow, the stages are built on a natural experience. Look at these performance artists. Like, it inspires me to become a better person that follow my passions. What is it about all of that? It tells the story, and people thankfully are getting that message without me having to tell them. I don't do a lot of interviews. I don't get on the stage. I like being behind the scenes. I like to create an experience that tells that message.
I dig that. I agree. Even doing video, it's funny because I've had a podcast for 6 years, and now I'm doing video. People are like, who's the person doing all of this stuff behind the scenes? I'm like, you know, first of all, I probably should have put that together. I didn't know that was your brother, Forks Over Knives. So I remember watching that with one of my best friends, and we immediately took to the internet. We're like, is he okay? because you know, we hadn't seen him post in a while. And I remember,
wow,
you know, he talked about a lot of stuff in that documentary. There was a lot of stuff. And I did veganism for about 6-7 months because of that, just out of curious. And now, you know, I'm kind of doing what a friend of mine calls a qualitarian, if you will, more so closer to pescatarian, but it's still got to be, you know, wild caught. So, but yeah, you know, but because nutrition was a very big deal. I started learning it years ago, but then over the last couple of years, I really got into, because I wanted to understand my brain capacity and my neuroreceptors and my neurological system, and I wanted to understand my body and why was I, you know, brain fog. And as we get older, we want to continue to create, but I was exhausted. And food, you know, a lot of it came down to food. And so I remember watching Forks Over Knives and thinking, wow, we could resolve a lot of problems in this world based on what's going on with agriculture, you know, animal agriculture. And it was wild to me. But yes. So, and, but the point that you brought up, I thought was really good. When we try to engage others in delivering a perspective, it can be hard because it can be met with resistance and argument. You're absolutely right. And people have even asked me, even with a lot of what's been happening the last couple of years, especially the last year and a half, said, why aren't you in the conversation? I'm like, I've been in the conversation just differently.
Yeah.
because for 8 years I've been talking about critical thinking, and that the greatest work you're going to do is actually it's an inside job. And as much as you think anybody on any side and anywhere in the world is going to save you, it's not really done like that. That's not really what the soul is here to do. So I found that instead of jumping into the argument, leading by example, and that's what I really gained from you. We're like, hey, we'll show you. We're not here to like put the modality or the mantra or the ideology on you. It's like, hey, we'll just show you by living, and by living our whole authentic selves, here's what comes out of that, and here's how we feel, and please choose accordingly, whatever makes you feel good in the process.
Yeah.
So I really respect you for bringing that up. I think that that's a immensely important thing. So.
And that was, I mean, that going back to like why I actually moved to Costa Rica, that was it. I had a vision that I saw myself wanting to live, and something that I wanted to educate the world on. But when I was living in Boulder, Colorado, which I love, Boulder is a cool town, and there's a lot of nature, but I was living in the wintertime, driving to work, thinking about how to like hydrate crackers in a warehouse. And I wasn't living the message that I was speaking. I don't even remember our mission statement at the time was something to help return our world to the jungle that it once was. And that's when I committed. I can't do this from a place that I'm not actually getting to live that. Whatever I'm going to create needs to be from that place of doing what I need, what I need to do, where you prioritize yourself so you can give the greatest version of yourself, right? So you can actually come from that authentic place. And when I made that commitment, that's when I knew that I wanted to create a sustainable community and find a farm. And that's where it all started. And I don't think I could have been a part of creating all of this if I wasn't doing it in that way.
So true. A lot of times removing ourselves from the very thing we're trying to be and putting ourselves in a different environment allows us to become it.
Yeah.
Sort of, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, like just thinking out loud, kind of what you say. I mean, you're here in your Boulder, Colorado, and then you're like, let me put myself into the actual thing I'm feeling inside, and then naturally it becoming the very thing you're like, hey, let me actually show you what sustainable living really is like, versus creating for a sustainable market, right?
Exactly.
And I sometimes think I would love for you to expand on, building lasting sustainable communities, right? Because it's a very collective behavior as well too, and it's a very like deep understanding both at a core level and then at a human level, at a other people level. What has that been like for you down there? Like, what have been some of the things that you found that the ease, the not so easy parts along the way? Like, what did you learn in kind of creating, especially since you went down there, not really knowing how it was all going to turn out. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a learning lesson. I mean, it's definitely, it's really cool right now too, because I mean, obviously there's a lot of hardship happening on the planet, and but it's also that I told you so moment about sustainable communities. So a lot of people are now looking, and since I've been down here in the last 15 years, and I'd love to feel that Envision is and will continue to be a showcase, a platform of what concepts are for sustainable living, especially in this environment. It's a place where conversations can happen. And parallel while doing that, I've also been developing Harmonia, my retreat center and sustainable community, taking my time and doing that and seeing how it all works. So one, we've had the experience in creating a city that pops up once a year, and doing something like that in Costa Rica, like you literally have to build the city. We don't easily rent infrastructure. It doesn't just show up if something's late. We can't just call a porta potty company and all of a sudden another 50 porta potties come up. Like, it's easier to build all of our food stands. We don't have one easy up tent at the festival. We build everything out of bamboo. So this has been, the festival itself is literally I'd say microcosm of but it's a macrocosm of something that is a short-term example of a sustainable community. So while creating that, after 10 years of doing that, it's been this huge opportunity. We've always talked about merging these concepts of sustainable communities that I and several other partners that started Envision, we've created this not just as like a dream that could be. We've all already been like, I've planted over 100 varieties of fruit trees on my property. I live the message that we're teaching at Envision. So after 10 years, being able to merge the two of them, and now we're actually working on a permanent Envision village, a permanent Envision community. So it's been a slow, calculated process to where we can finally take all the things that worked for the festival in terms of creating a city that houses about 10,000 people, and all of the ways in which that we can create opportunities and businesses and infrastructure and systems and payment systems and technology that ties it all together, to create that capsule for something that is permanent. So it feels like it's all of these two different worlds, where one was creating a small sustainable community and creating a festival that's inspired off of that general concept. The two of them are merging and saying that all of the best of this and all of the experience in doing that get to blend. So it's seeing a lot of different people come down here. The amount of times I've met people coming down here to Costa Rica to create a retreat center, to create a sustainable community, and not know everything it takes, how difficult it is to get things done in Costa Rica, anywhere in the world, and how to do it. It's been beautiful to see, to be at a place where I've seen all the things that can go wrong. Well, always a learning lesson.
Right. We stay humble. We stay humble.
Yeah. But at least, we see the ways in which that we can make something work. All the ways that I've seen other people and other forms and models that didn't work. So now we're at an intersection where and it's not necessarily about us creating the ultimate sustainable community and we're going to take over the world.
Right.
There's no competition in creating sustainable communities. It is not a business that is a competition. But this is something that these are solutions for the planet. This is an example of the solution for the planet, and ideally people look to us as an example for how they can also create that. Not saying every person in the world should move to Costa Rica. There's not enough space. But how can we take where we're at and bring these concepts to that place? Just like permaculture is a phrase based on permanent agriculture, but it also goes into living systems, right? And all of those living systems are adaptable to your environment. So it does what works for us in this environment, even what works for us right here versus 10 kilometers from here. The trees that work on this mountain might not work down there. So everything has to be slightly adapted and evolved. And we think about, but keeping in mind, how can we do that in a way that creates opportunities for everybody that lives in the community, ways in which to govern that community so it doesn't turn into hippie Lord of the Flies.
Right.
In 5 years, it all sounded good in theory that we're all going to be amazing neighbors and we all love each other for the rest of our lives. And then all of a sudden you have one neighbor that goes crazy and so creating systems that protect every person, just like at the festival. We created an amazing capsule. All of this amazing community comes into it. But of course, we have to plan for the worst case scenarios also. So it's being realistic in terms of having a dream and setting the best intentions for that dream, but also being very realistic as to creating safety mechanisms that can protect and most importantly, creating opportunities for growth for other people in that community. So it's not just necessarily buy into this, you have to live in some other remote part of the world or in New York City to make enough money to come to your sustainable community, because you didn't think about how to create that opportunity for people in that sustainable community.
I love, I love everything you're saying, especially because of blending. Hey, these are all the good things that we can do as a solution, and let's also be prepared for, let us not be so naive not to prepare for intrinsically what, the other things that we've seen in the past that didn't make it sustainable. Especially when it comes to, when you're talking about building a community in a city, if you will, right? Because to your point, you're like, yeah, we don't want to just be some, where it's just like this hippie community, and then after 5 years, the Lord of the Flies, we suddenly, and I believe it helps make it more mainstream in the way that you are approaching it. And I've always loved blending business and spirituality. And people ask why. And I'm like, well, because the greater we know ourselves and the greater we understand ourselves and the greater our awareness and the greater we operate from here, which is our most honest self, the more impact and accountability we're taking in everything else that we're doing, especially in business. And we are taking time to think through all of these other things that are so important, because we'd love to think that everybody is evolved and ready to, yes, I'll get in there and, and then a few years later, all of a sudden they want to govern differently, So, preparing, I always say, humans are humans. All right. I mean, souls, we're all
Totally.
souls, but humans are humans. And people always ask, and I was asked last year by a young entrepreneur. She asked me, she said, people always surprise me. Do they surprise you? And I said, never. And she said, what do you mean? I'm like, they never surprise me. And she's like, but they're always doing things that you didn't expect. I'm like, I expect that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm like, so I always take into consideration, kind of like what you're saying, is like, not what could go wrong, but like, how do we account for the possibility of those things, so that way we're being responsible in actual long-term sustainability for a concept that is here to solve, not restrict. And so that's why I'm listening
People
to what you
change.
Yes,
Yeah,
they do. And we have to always account for humans. I say it in business all the time. I'm like,
absolutely.
I love you now. I'll love you in 10 years when you say, hey, I want to retire. I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to go become a farmer in North Dakota and I want out, or whatever. Maybe and I love you. So therefore I'm going to make sure everything is in order so you can do that if you just decide to go do something else, or whatever it might be.
Same thing for myself. Yeah, same thing for myself. What happens if I change? What happens if I say, you know what, I had a revelation and I want to work on Wall Street.
Right.
I want to make sure that all of this that we're creating can continue without me involved in it.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want that it has to be a hub based on any one individual. We're creating a platform and a container for growth and evolution that protects everybody in that and allows for growth and evolution.
Yes, that's exactly the flexibility to evolve accordingly and beautifully and appropriately, while mechanisms in place to account for humans being humans.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I always been like, well, humans will be humans. And I was thinking how you were saying it's going to take a little bit. You're glad that it's taken a little bit longer, but I actually think it's probably taking the right amount of time, because now being able to use modern technology that really truly supports that level of sustainability at a city level is where we're starting to merge more into. So it's quite exciting, because if you go back even 5 or 4, 6 years ago, it was getting there, but I feel like now it's ramping up. It's like Moore's law of technology went from 18 months to 2 weeks or something.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
So
yeah, and that's definitely something that we've even found within the festival. And one of our greatest lessons is not trying to do it all ourselves, but to create systems that how can you bring in people and using Envision as a brand and as the ethos, making sure it's cohesive, making sure that the food choices that are brought to the festival, the design, the materials used in construction, and it's all going to be under a brand and an ethos. But once it's done there, once it's accepted, how can we support those businesses? For us, instead of like us trying to run several food booths, we stopped doing that. And we said, how can we help curate the food booths? How can we make sure that they're all supported, that they can get organic fruits and veggies to them, because they're all coming to a very remote part of the world and they have no idea how much they're going to sell, how much they're going to need tomorrow. How can we support them? How can we create the technology? This year we implemented RFID, and food vendors were a little skeptical. What do you mean we're going to take a percentage off of this instead of just charging a booth fee? We said, you know what? Trust us. We're going to create technology that's going to allow you to focus on what you do best, create a platform for you to thrive in, and support you in doing what you do best, instead of us trying to do that and allowing them to fend for themselves. And every one of those food vendors did 10 times better this year. So that's the same lesson that, like, looking at within creating a sustainable community, we can bring that. What is the platform to bring other businesses into that sustainable community? I have a hotel, I have a retreat center, we have a restaurant, but that's a model for what can be. I want to create a platform that other businesses can come into it, other people can thrive. How do we align that with the brand, and how do we create the technology? Even if it's an app, you've got an app on your phone, and we're sustainable hippie community at the core of it. We want to walk around barefoot and be connected to nature, but hey, we all have iPhones, or maybe something.
Yeah.
But so how can we use technology in our advantage? Not to say that we should be sitting on every party on Instagram taking photos, or every yoga class, but you can very well link technology to when you buy a home here, that you can find out about that there's a yoga class going on in the morning, and your business that we brought in as a tour company, to know that tour company is going out at a certain time, push notification pops up. So there's technology that can help support all of these businesses that are within it. And what we're doing is to create a platform in a way to tie them all together and make sure that all of them follow the ethos and the brand that when you're going to be part of an Envision product, that it's all going to follow the people, planet, profit. It's all going to be under our connection to nature, our connected, and our desire to find the greatest good in ourselves and live our most inspired lives. Everything always fits under that brand ethos. And
that's it. It's true. It is exciting. It's truly incredible what you're doing, because you're using technology or reality of like, hey, listen, we can blend these beautiful tools to make this type of living possible. We don't have to be one or the other. We don't have to be like, we will not use the iPhone. Like, look, it can be a convenience tool when used appropriately and embedded into creating what the word actual sustainability means, especially like what you're saying for, these food vendors, right? I mean, that's incredible when you think about it. And they were probably like, oh, I get it now. And we have self-reliance. And higher profitability and more systems and processes. And I don't feel as overwhelmed.
Totally.
So
you have to get the buy-in at first, but
well, always. Well, and again, I think it's because of that beautiful blend that you're doing of hey, let me show you how it works in your favor. And reduces. I love the idea in business of, let me show you how to reduce overwhelm, increase productivity, increase profitability, reduce waste, increase efficiency, right? Increase customer retention and behavior and all these things. And you start to really look at that. A lot of it in the States, they started with like the conscious capitalism movement. You start to see how that actually falls in line with a greater, ecosphere, if you will, of whatever it is you're creating. So I think that's absolutely phenomenal. I do have a very important question then. Will you be taking this model and running for president in 2040 of the United States?
I'd rather be president of our own micro government right now.
Totally feel you on that. I totally feel, you know,
Yeah.
give the this, you know, the world a good 20, 30 years, and then they start to see a living, breathing model of like, oh, this is why that works, right? And it's like, yeah, this is why that works. You know, when you work from uh, a greater good, but like, well, again, it's because it's a lot of the values you're instilling within the ecosphere of what you're creating. So it's like, hey, I want you to thrive, but I want you to be self-reliant. I don't
Yeah.
want to enable you, but I want to educate you and then help implement the things that would allow you to do that. So you've got this kind of infinite loop of, there's a lot that's possible. Whatever you don't know, you will be shown how to do that, so it can streamline for what you would like to do, so you can create more, because that's what creators do best in any industry, any business. And it allows them to thrive. And whatever they don't know, the barriers have been reduced, but it increases their self-reliance. And I think that, so when you're bringing in all of the important factors that make people thrive, and that's sometimes what's missing from big governance. I'm trying to be very selective, but you get what I'm saying. Like, we're all,
absolutely.
yeah, right.
And to me, I've always believed that, you know, especially like people moving to Costa Rica, the reason that they're moving to Costa Rica is because of the nature, because they're thriving they want to, maybe some people are moving here because land is cheaper and they get a good ocean view. But in general, people are coming here to connect to nature. They're finding something that they weren't able to find in their previous homes. So, you know, I believe that if you're giving people the option to do the right thing, and it's easy and it's convenient to do that, I'd like to genuinely believe that the majority of people will choose the right thing. When you show somebody, this is a home and it's built out of concrete, steel, and it's doesn't have any fruit trees, plants around it, similar price point. This is all built out of natural materials with the earth. Here's all gardens around it. You can grow all your own food. This is the easy way to do it sustainably. People will choose that if they're seeing that there's a similar product. If organic foods were at a similar price point as non-organic, if it was easy to find it, people will choose that right option. There's probably not everybody in the world, unfortunately, goes so far out of the way to find that and to do that. So it's our responsibility to make it easy and make it convenient to make those right choices.
That's such a well-stated point. If the barrier for making the right choice is is drastically reduced, because then people inherently want to make the right choice. It's just that when you're seeing so many other things sometimes thrown at them, that like, oh, so that's the easier way to get the thing or do the thing or have the thing or whatever. Well, should I just do that because that looks a little bit more fun than this? And it's like, well, what if both were presented to you and technically this is even better and just as easy and feels right? Oh yeah, a majority of the population would easily go for that more. So it's a very big
I'd
mission.
like to believe so.
I'd like to believe so too.
I'm gonna go with that. Yeah.
I believe I'd like to believe you're 100% on that. It's reducing the barrier to making that right choice seem much easier in doing it. And then it instills even better habits, because the more that they're doing it, they're like, oh, well, this just makes more sense. You're like, well, it always did, didn't it? But now it's easier to do so. So I dig it a lot. So what do you have like coming up next? What's next? I know you've got in 2022 but anything in general, like what's coming up next with you guys?
Yeah. So I've definitely talked about it a bit, but it's still concepts that we haven't fully launched, we haven't fully announced, you know, and we're careful to do so to make sure that we have all the things when people look towards us, we are able to answer all the questions. it goes back to the original point of being a little more strategic at my age now.
Absolutely. You don't have to, and you don't have to share anything that you're like, you know what, we don't have that
Totally,
solidified yet. We'll put it in the show notes 2 years from now. How about that?
But in general, definitely we're working on the concept for an Envision village and like an actual physical community that blends, all of the things that worked with the festival with a sustainable community. So that's right around the corner. I actually have to go soon to sign the closing papers on the next piece of land that we're tying into the piece of land that I currently own. So it's super exciting. We're also working on an educational online concept, because obviously we saw a lot of the music industry and festival industry going into an online model. So it got us thinking, unfortunately we're not, very fortunately, we got to produce. We were one of the last festivals that went off seamlessly before COVID hit. But so we didn't have to create an online festival just to stay relevant or to turn that lost opportunity into something else. But it definitely got us thinking of, what if we were to create something online, what would it be? So it's been about a year in conversation and in the making of creating an online educational platform that's really focused on the 7 pillars of Envision. So that's something that we're getting close to launching, and we're starting to do more and more stuff on our socials that are like just kind of the educational experience that leads into what that online platform would look like. So both of those are the major things that we're really focused on, and obviously looking at we're at a moment where we have an opportunity to use this brand and to continue to evolve it and look for other opportunities while growing sustainably, not trying to like overwhelm ourselves in the process. We want to make sure that each step is done strategically. And the greatest is that we've done, this will be our 11th edition of Envision coming up in February 2022. So, we've had 2 years to plan it, 2 years to be strategic about how we can do it. Obviously, there's still a lot that is undefined in the event industry, and we get to see other events, seeing how to navigate COVID. And we've had the advantage to sit back and see what works and come up with policies that make sense in terms of ticketing and be very strategic about it. And fortunately, we're already almost sold out on all of our tickets within unprecedented times before we even announced an artist. So we're incredibly fortunate to be in that position, that we get to be strategic and not have to worry about ticket sales and how we're going to continue to survive.
Oh, incredible stuff.
It's exciting.
One of the things I wanted to ask is, just in general for the general public listening, is it fairly easy to move to Costa Rica and make that transition? Is it fairly easy to buy property down there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can own land 100% as a foreigner. Absolutely.
Amazing. Noted. Yeah. I had wondered for some time, so I'm like, all right, well, I'll be calling Josh.
It's a safe government. It's there's always like challenges of doing things in a foreign country, but it's 100% safe and highly recommended.
Yeah, I had heard, I think this was a few years ago, that on the happiness index, it was like Costa Rica was the highest in the world or something like that. I was like, that's what first sparked me. And I know a lot of people I know were talking about moving to Mexico, or at least having a place there. And I said, I still like the idea of Costa Rica. If they're the happiest on the happy index, I'm like, something to consider.
Maybe this is a good time to
right.
That's the office right now.
Right. What that's incredible looking. That's unbelievable for everybody to see. Oh my God. Imagine that. What are you doing? I'm at the office. This is my office.
No matter how stressful things get, you're like,
you're like, oh yeah, life is good. Got it. where can everybody find you online, or at least, or Envision Festival? I know it's at Envision Festival on Instagram, but where, anything that you want to share, how people can get in touch for the initiative, or tickets, or just be a part of the movement. Please feel free to share.
Envisionfestival.com.
Yeah.
As we're launching these other concepts, we're working on how it all fits into the brand architecture, where you find all of these new concepts, because we're evolving from so much more than just a festival. But as of right now, everything's going to come through envisionfestival.com. And then the sustainable community and the retreat center that I have right now is Selva Armonia, SelvaArmonia, which is Harmony Jungle. That's where we live, and that's what we're creating right now, is essentially a showcase of what this is going to look like, and the content and the experience that you can have. So that's something that you can actually look at. You can actually come visit us, and it's essentially the sample of what's going to grow.
I'll see you next week.
All right, yeah. Do it, please.
Oh, this is incredible, Josh, having you on and talking about this. And this is important. Like, I'm so glad we got to connect, because it's just a breath of fresh air and sigh of relief for, I think a lot of people want these things. They just don't always know that they exist, or that they're being built. And with so many other things kind of, not looking so good, I try to remind them, like, no, there's actually a lot of amazing things being built right now, and that are future oriented, and really where we're really heading, because old paradigms aren't going to survive where we're going. So I think it's incredible what you're doing as a mission and a movement, and it's got legs, man. It's
exciting. Yeah, it's super exciting.
So
I would say, if you don't know, just come to the festival.
Yeah.
Check it out. Like, maybe you're not ready to live in Costa Rica and build your sustainable home. Maybe that's too big of a commitment. Check out the festival. See what it feels like to be barefoot in the jungle. Feel what it come up to Selva and pick a fruit off of a tree and eat it, and connect with the earth, and connect with the land, and connect with the plants, and create that relationship with nature. And so I go back to, is it feels right to be a human being living here. Is there something about it instinctively that this is where I can live if I'm living in nature? This feels right, and that is profound.
Yeah, well, and there's still so much to be built. Like it doesn't. It's almost like you're not removing yourself from life; you're creating it, and that's so important, because I think sometimes people associated with going to these, places like Costa Rica or Mexico or just other, nature-driven places, and saying, okay, like, I'm gonna just completely, go off grid. And it's like, well, no,
it's an escape.
You can create. Yeah, instead of escapism, it's more of like, no, actually, you can create, and actually build, and redefine. So it's incredible, man. Hold off for 1 second. We'll connect here offline in a second, but from recording. But this was an absolute incredible talking to, and for everybody listening, envisionfestival.com will lead you to everything that you guys need to know. But there's a lot more coming. So I highly urge everybody that's listening, bookmark the tab so you can kind of keep up with the journey as well, or follow on Instagram Envision Festival follow on Instagram Envision Festival, I can totally see a lot more coming into and follow Envision City down in Costa Rica. But thank you so much for your time and for being on the show. It really means a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It always helps talking about it and redefine, crystallizes the idea that much more. So
there's no going back now.
It.
Yeah.
No, it was too late, way too long ago.
Incredible. Sit tight for 1 second. But for everybody else listening, thank you guys so much. Be sure to check out Josh and Envision Festival, envisionfestival.com. Thank you everybody for listening to On Top of the Covers. It means a lot to our movement, and having conversations that are pushing the boundaries way far outside of any one industry, but ultimately contributing to the culture of music, and how that's actually bridging us to a lot of other topics that we wouldn't have normally thought of, right? And ways of doing things. And so we also just want to thank you guys for giving us feedback. Recently, we've had a lot of people leave us feedback on the podcast. Incredible. Because, we still live, for the time being, in an algorithmic world where Apple loves getting ratings and reviews, and then they share it with everybody else because of it. So if you guys can leave us a 5-star written review on Apple, that's incredible. And you can also follow us on all major platforms. We are Orlove, and we're myself, Matt Gottesman, on Insta. Be sure to subscribe to the Orlove YouTube channel. That's where this video of this podcast will be airing here shortly. And I'll be sure to make sure to get all this to you, Josh, as well. And we just appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. Thank you, and we're out.